When the transport pod landed on the alien outpost, the hum of machinery mingled with the quiet tension of the waiting beings. They were unlike anything the human had ever seen, tall, angular creatures with translucent skin that shimmered in shifting colors, and eyes that seemed to peer into the very fabric of his thoughts. Yet, despite their otherworldly appearance, the situation was painfully familiar: someone in need of care, someone vulnerable, and the prospect of being turned away. The alien veterinarians had already gathered around the injured creature, a hybrid beast that looked part reptile, part bird, its wings folded awkwardly against its thin frame. The humans had watched in disbelief as the aliens shook their heads, murmuring in a language of clicks and whistles that no one could understand. They pointed to the creature's wound and then back at the human, their message clear: we cannot help. Panic rose in the human for a moment. The creature's breaths were shallow, its limbs twitching weakly. In the back of his mind, he imagined the coldness of a refusal, a world where empathy had limits and kindness was conditional. He took a slow breath and reminded himself that panic would solve nothing. The human stepped forward, lowering his voice almost instinctively. "Easy, buddy," he whispered, not to the aliens, but to the trembling creature before him. The words were soft, deliberate, carrying no threat, no demand, only reassurance. He didn't shout, he didn't plead, he simply conveyed calm. For a heartbeat, everything seemed to freeze. The aliens paused, their heads tilting, as if reconsidering the meaning behind this simple human gesture. There was no force in the whisper, no authority, only an unmistakable steadiness. Something in that moment bridged the unimaginable gap between species. The creature's body relaxed slightly, and a subtle warmth began to pulse through its feathers and scales, a sign the human recognized as relief. It wasn't magic, nor was it luck. It was presence. The human had learned long ago that in moments of crisis, how you respond matters more than the circumstance itself. By protecting his own calm, he created a space where others, whether alien or creature, could sense safety. It was a lesson he had applied countless times in less spectacular situations: a frightened dog, a crying child, an angry colleague. Now it was being tested on a scale he had never imagined. The aliens murmured again, their clicks slower now, less abrupt, almost conversational. They glanced at one another, then back at the human, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them. Though their refusal had been immediate, the judgment seemed to shift in the presence of such quiet confidence. The human didn't press. He didn't argue or plead. He simply remained steady, radiating patience and understanding. Minutes passed, each one stretched taut with uncertainty, yet the tension gradually ebbed. The creature's breathing evened out, and the aliens stepped aside, their expressions unreadable but not hostile. In the delicate silence that followed, the human realized that the situation had changed not through force, but through composure. A refusal had almost turned into a tragedy, but the whisper of calm had opened a door that brute effort could not answer. In that strange, otherworldly outpost, among beings whose very existence challenged human understanding, the lesson remained simple and enduring: sometimes, protecting your own peace is the first step to saving another's life. The human's whisper had done more than soothe the injured creature, it had shifted the energy in the room entirely. The alien veterinarians, still hovering in their intricate metallic exosuits, watched him with cautious curiosity. Their refusal had been absolute, a wall of rules and protocols no human should think to breach. Yet here he stood, calm and unshakable, offering no argument, no demand, only words that carried quiet assurance. "Easy, buddy," he repeated, this time letting the tone stretch a little longer, carrying patience in every syllable. The alien's eyes flickered, a ripple of color passing across the translucent skin. To them, communication had always been precise, transactional. Words were tools, not expressions of intent or emotion. But the human's tone, the deliberate gentleness in his voice, suggested something entirely different: understanding without expectation, action without coercion. The injured creature shifted, its wings trembling as it attempted to rise. The human moved slowly, deliberately, letting it see his calm posture. He didn't rush, didn't reach out too quickly. The smallest gestures were magnified in this high-stakes environment, where a sudden movement could trigger panic or rejection. He knew that tone, posture, and intention often mattered more than words themselves. The aliens began to murmur again, soft clicks and hums blending into a rhythm the human couldn't understand. Yet he could sense the change. Their stance softened, their movements less rigid, almost tentative. He realized that his calm communication was not just reaching the creature, it was reaching them. It was teaching him a language they hadn't considered before, the language of patience and composure. He lowered himself to the creature's level, keeping his voice steady. "Take it slow," he whispered, almost like a meditation, a mantra. The creature's eyes, glimmering with fear moments ago, now met his gaze with a faint glimmer of trust. It flinched less at the alien veterinarian's movements and seemed willing to allow care, even if those administering it were unsure. No one spoke outright. The room was filled with tension so subtle it could have been mistaken for silence. And yet, in that quiet, communication flowed more profoundly than any words in any human or alien language could convey. The human had understood something vital. Calmness is contagious, and genuine composure can penetrate barriers that fear, anger, or frustration never could. He kept whispering, guiding the creature in tiny movements, allowing it to stretch its wings without panic. Each whisper, each careful gesture, became a demonstration, showing the aliens that there was another way to handle the situation, an approach rooted in empathy, patience, and presence. For all their technology and training, they had never seen this method, influencing without forcing, leading without demanding. Minutes passed, yet it felt like hours. The injured creature slowly rose to its feet, wings unfolding gradually, its breathing steady. The aliens exchanged looks, a subtle acknowledgement of the human's influence. Their initial refusal had been rigid, grounded in procedure, but now they moved aside, creating space for the creature's recovery to begin. In that moment, the human understood something simple yet profound. Words alone might fail, but tone, intent, and calm presence can achieve what arguments and force never will. Communication is not always about conveying information. Sometimes it's about conveying peace. Answer, amid alien eyes and a creature on the brink of despair, the human's quiet whispers demonstrated a universal truth. Calm words, delivered with genuine intent, can change hearts, minds, and outcomes without ever raising a voice. The room remained tense, yet a subtle shift had begun. The aliens no longer hovered as rigidly, and the injured creature had begun to trust the human enough to inch closer to him. It was a fragile truce, held together not by force, but by a thread of empathy that seemed to bridge worlds. The human realized then that trust, real trust, could transcend even the most unimaginable differences. He lowered his gaze to the creature, speaking softly. "It's okay. I'm here." His voice carried no expectation, no judgment, only understanding. The creature's wings twitched slightly, and it tilted its head as if considering his words. Across the room, the aliens watched, their own colors shifting, flickering with subtle curiosity. They had never observed behavior like this before, a being entirely different from themselves connecting through presence and patience rather than protocol. The human extended a careful hand toward the creature, palm open, allowing it to make the choice. Slowly, hesitantly, it edged closer, its eyes never leaving his. That small movement spoke volumes, an unspoken agreement born of mutual recognition and quiet empathy. It wasn't obedience or fear, it was trust earned through patience. The aliens murmured in clicks and whistles, their voices layered with unfamiliar emotion. The human didn't understand the words, but he could sense the meaning, surprise, contemplation, maybe even admiration. They were beginning to realize that empathy was not a weakness but a bridge. It allowed them to see the situation through someone else's perspective, to understand the needs of a being they had considered too alien to relate to. The human shifted slightly, maintaining a calm aura, demonstrating that he respected both the creature and the alien veterinarians. "I know it's confusing," he said softly, "but we can work together." He didn't demand their cooperation, he offered partnership. In that simple act, he demonstrated a principle that had guided him through countless conflicts. True understanding begins when you recognize the other's perspective without judgment. The injured creature leaned in slightly, its trust expanding with every patient moment. The aliens, observing this, began to mimic his approach unconsciously, slowing their movements, softening their gestures. They were learning that empathy was not just a tool for interaction, it was a force capable of transforming the atmosphere, calming fear, and creating possibility where none seemed to exist. Minutes turned into a quiet rhythm of mutual understanding. The human's presence acted as a conduit, connecting alien minds and creature instincts alike. It was a delicate balance, one that required patience and constant awareness. But with every small movement of the creature and every flicker of color from the aliens, the bond strengthened. Trust was no longer fragile, it was emerging, slowly but undeniably, like sunlight breaking through a storm. The human realized that the lesson extended far beyond the room. In any situation, even among beings so different from ourselves, empathy could bridge the divide. It required patience, attention, and genuine care, but it had the power to transform refusal into collaboration, fear into confidence, and isolation into connection. As the injured creature finally allowed the human to guide it gently, the aliens stepped back, no longer as obstacles, but as participants in a shared effort. They had been skeptical, hesitant, even fearful at first, but the human's quiet understanding had shown them a new path. In that moment, he knew that trust and empathy were universal languages, capable of crossing barriers that rules, authority, or logic could never breach. Answer: amid the alien outpost, creatures of unimaginable forms and beings whose instincts were foreign to human understanding, one simple truth became clear: empathy and trust can unite even the most unlikely companions. Even as trust began to take root between the human and the injured creature, the atmosphere in the alien outpost remained charged. The alien veterinarians were still present, their movements cautious, their attention sharp. The human could feel the tension in the air, a subtle vibration of uncertainty and expectation. Yet he remained centered, breathing steadily, aware that his own calm was the most important tool in this delicate situation. He remembered countless moments in his life when panic or frustration had only worsened outcomes. Here, millions of miles from Earth, among beings whose biology and language defied comprehension, that lesson became even more critical. Protecting one's inner peace wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. The stakes were too high, the margins too small, for anything less than complete presence and composure. The injured creature, sensing the human's steadiness, began to relax. Its wings, once tightly folded and trembling, stretched slightly. Its breaths deepened. The aliens observed silently, clicks and hums fading to a rhythm almost meditative. The human realized that his own equilibrium was contagious. His calm created a safe space in which others could respond without fear. "Easy, buddy," he whispered again, softer this time, letting the words flow like water. He did not rush the creature, did not demand movement or cooperation. Each gesture was deliberate, measured, designed to maintain a balance of trust and reassurance. He understood that inner peace was not a passive state, it was an active force, guiding decisions, influencing behavior, and shaping the environment. The aliens began to shift subtly, their postures less rigid, their movements smoother. It was as though the human's calm presence had reminded them that chaos was optional, that outcomes were not solely dictated by rules or urgency, but by the ability to remain composed under pressure. Their earlier refusal had been a reflex of protocol, now, they were starting to witness the power of serenity in action. The human guided the creature to a more comfortable position, moving slowly, carefully, always keeping his voice gentle. He sensed that the creature's trust had grown enough to allow small advances, but only because he had maintained a consistent calm. Each step forward was deliberate, each breath synchronized with the quiet rhythm he maintained. In this strange alien environment, peace was not passive, it was protective, transformative, and profoundly powerful. He realized that the lesson extended beyond this room, beyond this creature, beyond the alien veterinarians. Life, in its unpredictability, often demanded that one maintain composure even when circumstances seemed impossible. Protecting inner peace was a choice, a commitment to influence events not through force or panic, but through steady presence. It allowed him to navigate obstacles, to influence others, and to create conditions where trust and cooperation could flourish. The aliens, now observers of this extraordinary interaction, seemed to sense it too. They did not speak, did not act, but the tension in the room lessened. The creature, guided by the human's calm, allowed small movements, testing its strength, testing the environment, confident that it was safe. In that moment, the human understood that his whisper, his presence, and his inner stability were more important than any technology, language, or protocol. By protecting his own peace, he had created a ripple effect, calming fear, inspiring trust, and subtly teaching the alien veterinarians a lesson they would not soon forget. Answer: in the heart of an alien outpost, amid beings who spoke languages he could not understand and watched a creature that teetered between life and death, the humans. Unwavering calm proved that peace, once protected, could become the strongest force in the room. The human had realized something remarkable. His calm wasn't just soothing the injured creature or easing the tension of the alien veterinarians, it was quietly leading. Leadership, he reflected, wasn't always about authority or commands. Sometimes it was simply the act of remaining steady when everything around you threatened to spiral. By protecting his own peace, he had become the anchor in a storm, and others were instinctively drawn to it. The aliens, still watching, were no longer obstacles but participants in a delicate choreography. They mimicked his measured movements, unconsciously adjusting their own pace to match the rhythm he set. The injured creature responded in kind, moving carefully, testing its strength without fear. The human realized that his presence alone had created an unspoken chain of influence, a form of leadership that required no words, only consistency and calm intent. "Take your time," he murmured softly, letting the words flow like a gentle current. "We've got this." His voice carried no pressure, only assurance. The creature hesitated, then stretched its wings slightly farther, emboldened by the trust that radiated from him. The aliens shifted again, the complex, translucent bodies flowing with the subtle energy of the room. They were learning that leadership could be quiet, subtle, and profoundly effective. He remembered moments from Earth where panic and aggression had led only to chaos. True leadership, he had learned, emerged not from loud declarations or rigid control, but from the ability to influence through presence and example. In that alien outpost, millions of light years from home, that principle was being tested on an extraordinary scale. The human's attention never wavered from the creature. He guided it with soft gestures, careful encouragement, and consistent reassurance. Each movement was deliberate, showing the creature and the aliens alike that patience and composure were not passive, they were active, intentional, and powerful. Leadership, he understood, was not about doing everything for someone else, but about creating the conditions where others could succeed on their own. The aliens seemed to comprehend this instinctively. Their clicks and hums slowed, their motions softened, their postures less rigid. Where once there had been hesitation and refusal, now there was tentative cooperation. They had witnessed leadership in its quietest form, not through directives, but through unwavering calm and steady guidance. The injured creature, sensing the human's unshakable presence, began to move with increasing confidence. Its wings unfolded fully now, not perfectly, but enough to allow small attempts at balance. The human's calm had taught it something essential, that there was safety in patience, strength in composure, and courage in trust. The aliens, observing, seemed to grasp this lesson too, recognizing that influence could be exercised without coercion, and guidance without command. He thought of all the moments in life where he had tried to force outcomes, to control situations through urgency or insistence, only to find frustration and disappointment. Here, in the quiet of the alien outpost, he realized the opposite was true. Leadership was not about force. It was about maintaining inner peace, demonstrating steadiness, and allowing others to respond to that example. As the injured creature took its first confident step, the aliens stepped aside, silently acknowledging the human's influence. The lesson was clear. Leadership was not the loudest voice or the strictest rule, it was the ability to create a space where calm, trust, and cooperation could flourish. Answer: in the presence of alien beings and a creature on the edge of vulnerability, the human's quiet strength revealed a universal truth. True leadership flows from calmness, presence, and the unwavering protection of one's own peace. As the injured creature finally steadied itself, wings fluttering cautiously but with growing confidence, the human took a quiet step back and observed the room. The alien veterinarians, once rigid in their refusal, now watched with a mixture of awe and contemplation. The situation that had begun with tension and rejection had transformed entirely, not through force or argument, but through calm, empathy, and patience. The human realized then that the lessons of this encounter went far beyond this alien outpost, they were lessons for life itself. Everyday challenges, he reflected, often mirrored what had just unfolded. People act unpredictably, obstacles appear without warning, and fear or misunderstanding can create walls that seem insurmountable. It would have been easy to react with frustration, anger, or panic. Yet the human's choice to remain calm, to protect his peace, had allowed him to navigate the situation with clarity and effectiveness. That same principle could be applied to conflicts at home, work, or even in the mind when facing doubts or anxieties. The aliens murmured quietly among themselves, their clicks and hums softer now, almost reflective. They had learned something profound: presence matters, patience matters, and responding from a place of inner calm often achieves what rigid rules and rigid thinking cannot. The human realized that this encounter was a microcosm of life's larger challenges. Often, the key was not to control everything around you, but to control your response, your mindset, and your energy. He knelt again beside the creature, speaking softly. "You're doing well," he whispered. "Keep going." Each word was deliberate, designed not to command, but to encourage. The aliens observed, seeming to understand, even if their biology and culture were worlds apart. They had seen the ripple effect of one being protecting its own calm. It allowed others to respond, to trust, and ultimately to succeed. The human thought about the countless moments on Earth when he had failed to maintain peace in the face of pressure. Arguments had escalated, opportunities had slipped, and relationships had strained. It was always easier to react immediately, to try to force a resolution. Yet here, in an alien environment, the lesson was undeniable: protecting your peace first creates the conditions for better outcomes everywhere else. Calmness is not passivity, it is proactive, transformative, and contagious. The injured creature now attempted to take flight, its wings extending fully, albeit unsteadily. The human's soft murmurs continued, steadying it, guiding it without interference. The aliens, witnessing the transformation, had stepped back completely, no longer observers or barriers, but part of a shared understanding that had emerged naturally. The human realized that life often presents situations where one must act without expectation of control, influence without dominance, and lead without force. As the creature finally lifted off the ground, flapping tentatively but with confidence, the human allowed himself a small smile. The room, once tense with refusal and uncertainty, was now filled with a quiet harmony. The aliens' postures relaxed, their attention focused not on the rules they had initially defended, but on the results of patience, empathy, and calm guidance. In that moment, the human understood a universal truth: life will always present challenges that test your composure. People will refuse, circumstances will seem impossible, and fear will appear to dominate. But by protecting your inner peace, by responding with calm, empathy, and steady presence, you not only navigate the immediate obstacle, you create a ripple effect that transforms the environment around you. Answer: amid alien eyes, wings beating uncertainly, and a room that had once seemed full of insurmountable tension, the human's quiet approach revealed a timeless lesson: protecting your peace allows you to influence, guide, and transform every challenge you face.